one resident for every 38 residents of the United States. It's Ventriloquism Weekly. Hey everyone, Matt Bailey here, and I gotta tell you, today is another one of those days where I just get to sit back and let her roll. Phil Nichols of Facades, FX, Makeup Lab, and Creature Design joins us to talk about his incredible journey from vent to special effects artist and back again. It really needs no introduction. It's an incredible story. He just talks and talks and talks, and every question I could ever think of, he just answers in the next sentence. It was a lot of fun to get to talk to Phil. So he needs no introduction, really, except to say, here now, our interview with Phil Nichols. Phil Nichols, welcome to Ventriloquism Weekly. How are you today, sir?
I'm fantastic, and thanks so much for having me on. I really, it's wonderful to be here.
Oh,
Hey! Don't you forget about me. Oh, and Bosworth is here too. That's right.
Oh, hi,
it
Bosworth.
Ain't a show without Bosworth.
Ah, yes, I get you. I know the feeling. Gotta always have the partner in crime.
Well, yes. But we don't want to talk about the crimes in public. We'll do that later.
Oh, man, this is going to be a fun interview. I want to talk to Phil for just a few minutes here. Phil, how did you get started in ventriloquism?
Oh, wow. Well, let's see. I was born in Springfield, Illinois. And, you know, Illinois, back in the last century was where, you know, a lot of the ventriloquists came from, and it was part of the vaudeville circuit. And so, you know, ventriloquism was very prevalent in the culture up there. And I guess it was about it would have been 1969, I think. There was a missionary that came to the little church that we went to. We lived in a little rural farming community, 20 miles outside of Springfield, and it was a non-denominational Christian church. And they would get guest missionaries out of the seminary school a few miles up the road that would come and try themselves out. So one of them was a ventriloquist, and he made his dummy speak to me, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I think I want to do that. And then, of course, Edgar Bergen. That was the land of Bergen. I was raised mainly by my grandmother and my great-uncle and my great-aunts because my mom had to work. She worked at the electronics plant manufacturing the little micro switchboards that went into the stuff for the Army during the Vietnam War.
Wow.
So she had to work those hours, and my father had come down to Texas to try and make his way for us. So my grandparents raised me, and they were Depression era, and they listened to Edgar Bergen on the radio. So they were always telling me stories about what Charlie McCarthy did and all that stuff, and then they would repeat his movies. You Can't Cheat an Honest Man was on an awful lot up there.
Oh, neat.
And then, of course, at that time, Nestle was using Danny O'Day and Farfel for the Nestle Quick. So ventriloquism was just a part of our culture, much more than it is today. Well, but it is more today than it was, you know, about 10 years ago. But I mean, ventriloquism was really popular. Everybody, you know, howdy doody. Everybody had dummies and stuff. But it wasn't until we moved to Texas that I got my first dummy, and it was a Willie Talk. And we moved to Texas. I guess it would have been 1973. And I was 9, and got the Willie Talk, and I used a little pamphlet that come with that for the sound substitutions, and I figured out that I could talk without moving my lips, and it was pretty good, and I just kind of was toying around with it. But I was really into Dark Shadows and Monsters too. So you know, I spent half my time with the puppets and half my time with the monsters.
Yeah.
And coming from the Midwest down to Texas is a real big culture shock. It's a major culture shock. People down here are very different from the people in the Midwest.
In what
the
ways?
Midwest, if you're nuts, they put you in the nut house. Down here, they elect you to the legislature. So it was really a culture shock. I mean, just people that doing things that it was wow. So and then I didn't have a lot of friends, and I would lose myself in my imagination, and that's kind of where my ventriloquist personalities came from, was when we would pretend to do things with the imaginary friends and things like that.
Yeah.
Then I got a Simon Says, which was my first exposure to the head stick thing. I got that when I was in the 5th grade. And then in the 6th grade, I got a Charlie McCarthy replica dummy and Edgar Bergen's album. And they would always go back to Illinois in the summers, because I really did not like Texas. It was just too foreign for me. And we would, my sister and I would go to Illinois in the summers, and they had fairs. The fairs down here were not the fairs up there. The fairs up there were really fantastic. And they would always have a magician or a puppeteer or a ventriloquist. Every day, a different one would come and entertain at the fair. And I remember one summer there was a ventriloquist named Bob Trent, who had a talking crow named Roscoe.
Bob Trent.
Who he was a very popular regional ventriloquist in the Chicago and Michigan and Wisconsin area up there in those states.
That's incredible that you mentioned that. I got to interrupt. I got to interrupt you here, because that's incredible that you mentioned Bob Trent, a very good friend of mine who I've got to know over a couple of years before doing this program, Todd Oliver. His mentor, one of his first mentors, was Bob Trent. And so,
I knew that. Yeah. I've talked to Todd about Bob. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just incredible how it's all connected. That's really cool. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had to add that. That's awesome.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, we are a brotherhood. We're a brotherhood of wizards.
Yes.
And you find mentors where you can. If you've ever seen Jay Johnson's show, he talks about the wizardry aspect of it and the necromancy and all of that, and how in its beginnings, before it was an entertainment, it was a master and apprentice thing.
Yeah.
And that structure still applies to it today. If you're taking it seriously, you should find somebody with a little more experience. And I have had young ventriloquists on Facebook actually ask me things because they like the way I do my shows, and I can tell them from my perspective,
Yeah.
the way things are.
That's really cool.
But it was Bob Trent and Roscoe, and I took my little Charlie McCarthy dummy with me, and he got a kick out of that, and I got to meet him, and he was very nice, and I decided, I like this stuff a whole lot. I can't imagine not having it in my life. And there was something on TV that night when we got back from the fair. I think it was an Orson Welles roast or something, and Edgar Bergen was on it. And I decided I was going to write Edgar Bergen a letter. I did not know his address at all. I just knew he lived in Hollywood. So I wrote him a letter and addressed it to Edgar Bergen in Hollywood and sent it off. And then when we got back to Texas, about 6 weeks later, there was a package waiting on me from Edgar Bergen.
No way.
Yeah. Some kind-hearted soul had sent that letter to Edgar Bergen for me at the United States Post Office, and he sent me autographed photos and told me that I should get his album. It was, it was what he knew about ventriloquism was in the album, and a copy of his book that he'd written.
Wow.
So I always maintain that I learned the fundamentals of Edgar Bergen from that care package he sent me. And then, sadly, about 6 weeks later, he passed away.
Oh.
But that was just fantastic.
You should track that postal worker down if he's still alive. Find him and.
Yeah, I doubt that they're still alive. Those, the post office has changed considerably from the way it was in the 70s. So, yeah, it's a lot different now. But yeah, that's my Edgar Bergen connection. I mean, you know, and it's just the fates aligning that that happened. And then, of course, I began to see Jay Johnson on soap when I could. I mean, it was an adult program.
Yeah.
And, you know, we couldn't do too much about that.
Hear that time and again, people who became ventriloquists, they were not allowed to watch soap. The parents would call them in whenever Jay would come in to do his bit, which was usually some sort of slapstick, something to relieve from the tension. It was really cool.
Yep. And then Ron Lucas was... I was in the Cub Scouts, and I think it was Ron Lucas who was in the Cub Scouts and had built his own dummy. And in Boy's Life, they did a whole spread on it. And I was like, well, how'd he do that? And then I don't know where we found the ad, but it was for the Mayher Studios course.
Yes.
And it was a lot of money. I mean, we were a poor family.
Right.
So I had to do odd jobs and mow lawns and everything, but I raised the money to take the 1977-78 version of the Mayher course, which included the plans to build your own dummy. And that was really why I wanted the course, because I'd already gotten the fundamentals from Edgar Bergen. And it came in installments. I mean, and I had to pay it in installments. You know, I couldn't do it all outright, but I got it. And then over the course of the year, and I tried to build my first dummy out of that old nasty failure clay, and it was an utter failure. I mean, just a dismal failure. And then what I did was I made I think it was a Martian or something like that. I made it out of just newspaper and white glue, and I sculpted the face with Play-Doh, because Play-Doh would dry hard.
Yeah.
And that kind of sort of worked. But I didn't really have a quote-unquote professional dummy in those early days at all. I did figure out how to change the stuffed body Charlie McCarthy doll I had into the hollow body with the head stick. But beyond that, that's what I was performing with.
Well, no, it's
for
funny.
The longest time.
It's funny because now you built Bosworth, and I saw those pictures on Facebook. Bosworth is pretty advanced and really cool.
Well, I did build him. I had done. Let's see, about 10, I guess it's 10 years ago. I had done a stage production of Dracula, and you know, one of the reasons I kind of got away from ventriloquism was not anything other than just life. I went to school for theater arts, and I wanted to be an actor and a performer and ventriloquist. But back then, that would have been, and I graduated high school in 1982. The theater teachers were all full of themselves, trying to imitate John Houseman. And his famous line was, "The theater doesn't want you, the theater doesn't need you, do be a banker." You know, that kind of nonsense. So they frowned on ventriloquism. They frowned on anything that wasn't Chekhov or angst or, you know, these people needed therapy. They didn't need to be teaching classes. And
no comment.
And so I just kind of put the dummies away. I knew I would come back to it. I knew I would, but I just, you know, I had to do something that was paying the bills, and I wanted to act, but I couldn't, you know, there was I was very heavy. I was about 300 pounds. I was a very fat person. And there were people that were pretty, and the pretty people would always get the role.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, I'm going to have to do something to make a living, and I started to get people interested in my masks and my prosthetic and my makeup work, and I thought, well, let's give that a try. And I did some research, and I had known all along. Dick Smith was the top makeup artist for me. I mean, he'd written a book. Same time, Edgar Bergen was my ventriloquist idol. Dick Smith was my makeup idol. He'd written a book called The Handy Dandy Do-It-Yourself Monster Makeup Handbook, and I'd gotten that. And it was basic stage makeup with grease paints and nose putty and stuff like that. But it was the first time me as a 10-year-old kid had ever been exposed to that stuff. I mean, when I would make myself up, I was really into clowns. So I would make myself up as a clown using, my mom sold Avon, and I'd use her sample lipstick case. And more times than not, I went to school looking like Cesar Romero from Batman with the Joker grin from that red lipstick of the 60s that would stain me, and I didn't care, but she was embarrassed. Anyway, I reached out to Dick Smith the same way that I'd reached out to Edgar Bergen. I had his address. I was in college, and I went to the Who's Who of America book because I heard he was in it. And I found his address in Larchmont, New York, and I wrote him a letter, and I sent him some photos of what I'd been doing. And he wrote me back, "You're having fun, but I don't think you should pursue this as a career. Go be a dentist."
What?
And I was like, wow. Merry Christmas to you, too. But I didn't let that stop me. I kept at it, and I kept trying to figure things out. Hindsight, I wish I would have taken some studio art classes, because everything, the figure building and the special effects work, you really need a foundation in the studio arts of drawing, painting, and sculpting. And I'm self-taught in all of that stuff. When I started to figure out that that's what that stuff was, and finding books and doing the exercises for that, then he was like, "Okay, you're not a total waste." And he started to tell me some secrets and things like that. But
really cool.
It was hard earned, the knowledge I got from him.
Oh, that's the best kind.
And when my father passed away in 1990 from a 3-year battle with lung cancer, I got a small inheritance, and Dick had written his famous course. Yeah. And he was starting his 3rd class. And I had the money to take the course. And that's how I learned, but it was printed. And you're pretty much on your own to do the exercises. It's like when you're in high school and doing those modules. It's up to you. I mean, that's the knowledge, but it's up to you to figure out how to use it. So nowadays, you just go on YouTube, and there's a million videos for everything you want to know. I just feel like y'all are spoiled.
Yeah, we're sometimes to the detriment too. If you find something not so good and you take it as you take it as word, you can't. Sometimes those habits become hard to break. So good and bad.
Yeah. But so that's how I pretty much And there was a fledgling movie business in Houston. RoboCop was shot here. Some other things were shot here. And there was a man in town who had made some movies in Hollywood, and he recently moved to a suburb of Houston called Friendswood. And he was going to start making 3D movies. And he was looking for special effects people, and I met with him, and we hit it off.
That's great.
And he gave me my start, and we've been friends since 1988. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I discovered we were both ventriloquists.
Wow.
And his name is Warren Chaney. He was a big-time ventriloquist with Colonel Bill Bowley and all those guys. Was real big in the scene. And he's got 3 of Jack Coates' figures that he used to use on. He did a show out in Hollywood.
That's just incredible. That's just
crazy. I mean,
Crazy.
ventriloquism, whether in the forefront or the background, has always been in my life. It's like the sun that I orbit around, and everything I do is connected from 1 to 6 degrees to ventriloquism. Everything. I went out to Hollywood in the mid-'90s and, did day calls and whatnot, and got in the union out there as a regional member, and met a man named Henry Alvarez, who he's just a fantastic wax museum sculptor. If you've seen anything in the Ripley museums or anything like that, he and his family sculpted them. He's just a marvelous man. He had worked for Rob Bottin for many years, and if you've seen the movie Legend, he sculpted the big red devil outfit for Tim Curry and the Green Witch and all those kind of things. Anyway, I met him through an acquaintance, through Greg Nicotero at K&B. I'd gone to their shop while I was out there, and they didn't have any work for me, but they were going to introduce me to the Inner Sanctum. I met Bob Burns, and while I was over at Bob Burns' house, Walter Koenig showed up. So I spent the afternoon talking monsters and toys with Chekhov and Bob Burns, and that was really a treat. And anyway, I made an appointment to meet with Henry, and he looked at my folio and he said, "You know, you've got great talent, but you're still green, and I can do something with you if you want to apprentice with me." So he taught me figure sculpting, and he was very fatherly in the way he would teach. While Dick was very New York, that sucks, don't waste my time. Henry was very much more of a mentor.
Yeah.
And I did 3 pieces with Henry, and he passed away a couple of years ago himself. So, and Dick passed away this year. So all my mentors are deceased. So I guess that means it's my turn.
Okay.
But I don't know why I got on that, but I told you I ramble.
Hey, I love ramble. I love when you just hit, I have questions, and then before I can interrupt and ask them, you come back with an answer that's just 10 times cooler than anything I would have got by just asking the question. So please ramble.
Okay. You know? Okay. But that's and that's what I do now. I sculpt the high-end collectible bust. The recent sculpture I did was Cesar Romero's The Joker that a lot of the ventriloquists got a real kick out of, because it's something from our childhood, the people of my generation, and I'm hoping as soon as I clear my workload out to get Burgess Meredith as the Penguin done, but I'm real busy making copies of all my older pieces, because I didn't know, I'm collected. There's people all over the world that collect my busts.
It's crazy.
I think we were talking about Dracula and Bosworth. Okay, well, this is connected to that.
Yeah.
In 2004, all my career, I had done all kinds of things. Mainly in the early days, I did dramas, where you actually had to know how to do every kind of makeup effect and makeup there is. And it had to be realistic. I did a lot of that stuff. And then I did gangland violence, because Houston at the time was rap video central. And all those things came together in a movie called Jason's Lyric, where I did the effects for it. I made Forrest Whitaker into an amputee and killed a bunch of people, fake kill, not real, and things like that. And I'd done a lot of that, and did the stuff for Warren Cheney, and was kind of just, wondering what was going on. In the mid-'90s, there was a political shift in Texas where everything went really to the right. Mm-hmm. I mean, scary right sometimes. And what had happened in that shift was a lot of the incentives that Hollywood had on the books dried up, so they went away. There was no more feature work, and I did big stuff. I did the second Ace Ventura movie. I did Powder, that Disney movie. I mean, there's a lot of big time stuff being done here. But they, those good old boys in Austin decided that they wanted kickbacks or whatever, and it went away and went to Florida. Mm-hmm. So I needed to find a way to make a living, and I just started making rubber noses and taking them to the local costume shops, and they said, "Well, do you have this, this, and this?" And I started making it all, and before you knew it, I had come up with 100 different prosthetic makeup kits. And then I heard about this big trade show in Chicago, the big World Halloween Trade Show, and I took my stuff and I got approached by Ruby's Costume Company. The president came by, and we struck a deal, and I've been on royalties with them since 2000, and Real Effects has changed the Halloween industry. So that became my stability, which allowed me to go back to college and get pick up some science and stuff that I didn't take my first time around. Geology, paleontology, stuff like that, because I'm really into dinosaurs. And studio art. I finally took studio art. Collected sculptor, but I'm taking drawing one, because two-dimensional art to me was like a foreign language, and I needed to learn to speak it. And by being able to do that, my sculpting became better. And I had heard of a little theater group that was going to do a production of Dracula.
Yeah.
And I told them that I wanted to do their effects because all my career I'd never gotten to do a vampire project, and I grew up on Barnabas Collins and Christopher Lee's Dracula, and I was like, hey, I want to do a vampire thing, and nobody ever wanted to do it. So, and it's Texas. Vampires, down here. Louisiana is vampire country. Texas is Bigfoot. So,
Oh, Bigfoot.
They said, sure, this is your budget, and it was a new script by a guy named Stephen Dietz, and it had a lot of the elements of the novel in it, which was really cool. Dracula himself started out as the old vampire and got younger when he got to England, and that was going to be fantastic to do and figure out how to do it quick change. So I went to the auditions just to see the candidates for Dracula. And the director asked me, did I want to audition? And I'm like, are you crazy? I got too much to do. And then the people got up to read Renfield, and I'm like, oh, you people are just bad. You don't know what you're doing. So I got up and I read Renfield, and I did it. And basically, when I started doing my imitation of the Dwight Fry laugh, the oxygen left the room because I creeped people out so bad, and I was offered that role. And I love it. I did it, and I was the scariest thing in the play.
Okay. I'm gonna stop you. Go ahead and do it.
Oh, the laugh?
Yeah, I gotta hear it. I love it. That's creepy and awesome. And okay, all right. Now I'm scared to talk to you and finish this interview. No, I'm kidding. Keep going. I'm sorry. Tangents. Okay, go ahead.
And I, that was also at the time when the digital revolution hit. Boom! No more film. Everything digital. Filmmaking is now affordable for everybody. And good and bad goes with any kind of change like that. Anyway, I decided enough with the theater stuff, enough working for other people. The royalties were good. They were my foundation. I wanted to form my own movie company. And so we wrote a few scripts, and I thought I needed to write a vampire project. What could I do? And I was watching the Oscars or some award show, and they were talking, somebody had won, and they were talking about how it started out as a play and all that stuff. And I thought, well, what have I done as a play? Oh, I did Dracula. Oh, I could write a Renfield movie. Oh, that'd be fun. So I did. I wrote the first draft. And then, of course, you shop it around, and everybody's got a million opinions. And you try and rewrite to please all of them. And then, 3 years later, you go back to square one.
Yeah.
And we tried to get it produced many, many times and finally wound up doing it ourselves. And took it to the American film market and just did not do very well there at all. And I think it was timing on our part. Twilight had come out, and if it wasn't the Twilight vampire, nobody cared. And we were doing the Nosferatu, the real folklore vampires. And Walking Dead had hit, and people just wanted zombie stuff. So eventually we did get it sold, but that's a whole other conversation that I really don't want to go into.
Oh, the logistics of show business. Yes.
Yeah.
Business of the show.
Yeah. But we were driving to AFM one morning, and I had gotten, because they're talking about making Renfield into a comic book, and there was a comic book producer up in Dallas who'd sent me a sample pack of their comics. One of the comic books they sent me was a title called The Dummy's Guide to Danger. And and I don't think he was really a ventriloquist. I just think he was a nut cop who had a dummy as a sidekick, and in his mind the dummy would talk. And the dummy had a one-word name named Bloomberg. And I thought, you know what, that's kind of cool, a one-word name for a dummy. Well, what would the name be for me? Well, Richard III is my favorite Shakespeare play.
Yes.
And Richard got killed on Bosworth Field. So, hey, Bosworth, that's a cool name.
That is a really cool name.
The thing Bosworth. Well, what should it be? Bosworth, what should it be? Then I remembered Bob Trent. And I decided then, driving in Hollywood traffic, that I would make a crow dummy and name it Bosworth. And then I started to try and think about the personality and everything like that, and I couldn't wait to get back home. I didn't care if we sold the movie or not. I had other things I wanted to do. Got back here, I started sculpting him out, and I'd been in touch with Clinton Detweiler. I'd reconnected with Clinton when I started to get back into ventriloquism. And I think the catalyst for me getting back into ventriloquism happened in 2005. I wanted to do more animatronic things in the workshop, and I was looking for some mechanisms. And Mike Brose had written a book on building dummies. Figure making can be fun.
Yeah.
And my sister had gotten me that for Christmas, and I loved it. It was fantastic, and I just devoured it. And it started me thinking about ventriloquism again. And then Terry Fader was on America's Got Talent. He won, and Letterman did his ventriloquist week with the first time with the ace, the cream of the crop. The second time, he was just mocking him. But the first time was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And there was Jay Johnson, there was Ron Lucas, there was all these guys from my past that I idolized, and they'd stuck with it, and they were just brilliant performers. And I'm like, how about that? And then, it just was a natural, one of those little slow transformations from the special effects artist into the ventriloquist over the course of the last 10 years. Just a series of events happened, and here I am today, performing with Bosworth and Corky and soon to be Molasses, who will be my slow figure. He's going to be a possum, and he's going to be the retarded one, and he'll be fun to do. So.
Very, very cool. Lots of cool stuff happening. And the one thing you may have touched on it going through the timeline, but the thing I want to draw out is, where was the influence I'm trying to phrase this because I know you touched on it just in such nice terms over that whole thing that you just did. Just the idea of going from vent to special effects, and you say that life happened. Why is that what you turned to, and not something necessarily even more stable, but still in show business?
Well, that's just what would come in and would pay. I mean, my dad started to get sick, and I had to drop out of college. I got my associates, but I didn't finish the bachelor's. I had to drop out of college to take care of him, and I could make $400 or $500 a day doing effects work. Where you would only make maybe $80 to $120 a week working a job with the hours I had. So I could work less, make more, and spend more time taking care of my dad and my family.
That's great.
And that's really why I did it. Hindsight, I kind of wish that I would have been able to finish the teaching degree. But you live your life going forward, not going back.
Absolutely. And so that actually is perfect lead into the final question, which is, and choose, you can say special effects, you can say vent, you can do both. In fact, do both, because I want to know what you want to see out of people entering this incredibly diverse realm of show business today. What do you think, what do you look for in ventriloquists, and look for people who want to get into the special effects stuff?
Well, the people getting into effects, I want you to be kind to each other, because it's a flooded market now. A lot of the schools, everything, and the mystery has gone out of it. Shows like Face Off and everything, everybody has peeked behind that curtain so many times that it's full of tatters. And ego is creeping in, and all of that, and you have to remember that you're artists, and all artists have a little ego. You have to. It goes with the territory, but at the same time, respect each other's work. Here's something that was told to me when I was working on Ace Ventura. John Jackson, who was Matthew Mungle's partner at WM Creations. Matthew won his Oscar for Bram Stoker's Dracula. John won his for Frida. And we both knew Mike Westmore, who was doing Star Trek. And John had done some day calls recently, and we were talking about different styles and things like that. And he said, older artists in this business don't judge. We don't criticize. We're not harsh to each other because you don't know what that artist had going on at the time to produce that piece of art. You don't know how long he had. You don't know the budget he had. You don't know the difficulty he had making the thing. So the best thing to do is, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And that's what I would like to see more of. Taking into consideration the circumstances under which that piece of art was done. Something that I didn't like when I got back into art school was the critique thing. They actually made you critique. It was part of your grade. You had to critique. And I had a real hard time critiquing other people's work because of coming from a professional background where you just didn't want to do it. And another reason you don't want to do it is if you badmouth somebody, sooner or later you're going to be working for them. And they're going to find out what you said. Yeah. Especially with Facebook. Oh my God, so many people are so dumb.
Exactly.
Oh, they're friends with these people they're trashing, and they're their bosses. And I've seen some pretty big effects companies come down like a ton of bricks on some of their employees for some of the stuff they're posting.
Yeah.
Because, I'm friends with all of them. So I think more respect in the effects world is what I would like to see, because everybody does the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be somebody better than you, and you're always going to be better than somebody else. Just be kind. Do the best you can when you're doing it, and take pride and joy in that, and have some joy that way. As far as ventriloquism, it's just a renaissance what's going on now.
It's beautiful.
Because we all perform the same basic thing of sound substitution and pressure on the vocal cords to change the voice, but we do it in so many miraculous ways. Terry Fader is just ventriloquism in concert. I could never do that. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. In fact, that's part of my show where Bosworth tries to sing. And it's just, and Jay Johnson, he's theatrical, and that is something that I admire greatly. Jay is one of my idols, and
yeah.
And I every once in a while I'll bug him and ask him to look at something I've done, and he'll do me the honor of critiquing me, and that's just a big thrill to me. And Mark Waite with the kids show stuff, there's nobody better. And actually, I've hired Mark a couple times to write scripts for me because the way he writes is really good for my shows. I have to tweak the dialogue sometimes because he's writing from his perspective, and then I'll be performing it from mine. But the basic setup is that I would encourage anybody that's having a hard time. You got the idea and you don't know how to put the words down. Get a hold of Mark because he can really help you there.
Oh, he absolutely. He's incredible.
And I just look forward every day to it. I perform ventriloquism mainly for TV on the Keys for Kiddos faith-based show, and I actually have gotten the producers of that to not be so heavy-handed with the message with the ventriloquism because I don't like that. Mm-hmm. A message of hope is great, but trying to lecture with a dummy, that's not what I want to do with it. And that's just my personal take on it. I don't want to be, I'm not ordained. I don't want to be a minister ministering with the dummy. And I want to entertain people and point them in the direction to the minister so that he can do his job.
Yes.
That's the way I feel about that. And then, of course, also the way I perform it is a bit theatrical, old world vaudeville. I dress in the old style. And, in fact, I'm having a custom backdrop made by the Magic Backdrop guys that looks like an old-time vaudeville stage curtain.
Oh, I'm excited to see that. That's cool.
So, and what I'm finding, the people that I perform for, which are middle-aged and older, they really love that. Mm-hmm. They really love that I bring the old-time stuff back to them. Whereas the younger generation is going to respond to Jeff Dunham and, the comedy club stuff. It's just ventriloquism is theater. It is a performance art, but it is theater, and the limits are only those that we put on ourselves. I mean, it's an exciting time to be back in the renaissance of it, because it really had gotten a bad rap back in the 80s and stuff when the comedy clubs started up, because there were a lot of comedians that thought they could just pick up a puppet and call themselves a ventriloquist. And they started getting gigs they shouldn't have gotten, and boom, we suffered for it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got people that have automatonophobia. Well, too bad for them. Just because you're scared of it doesn't mean you can ruin everybody else's good time. If you can't stand to be around a puppet, don't come to the show. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I
have a puppet that's a killer clown, and when I find out somebody's got automatonophobia, I bring him out, and we all just have a great time.
That's cruel and awesome all at the same time. Oh, my word.
I believe that there are rules for society, and they've kind of gotten thrown away.
Yeah.
And, watch what you say, because it's going to come back to haunt you. Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect example. And there's always a mouthy one. And if you deal with them and you do it in a way that the audience gets some schadenfreude out of it, you're going to get a standing ovation.
I love it. I love it.
So, yeah, well, I don't like to do it.
No.
But I will.
All right, that's great. Great note to end on. Thank you so much, Phil Nichols, for being with us today on Ventriloquism Weekly. Very much appreciative of your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was great fun. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Goodbye. Goodbye now. God bless.
Goodbye, Bosworth. Thank you so much to Phil for filling us in on your fantastic story. Okay, I know, bad pun. I'm entitled to one a month, okay? I amuse myself. Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you again, Phil. Pun aside, I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. It was really great to talk to you, and I've never had a special effects artist on the show, a makeup special effects artist. He forgot to tell you, before I sign off, he forgot to say, and I told him I'd say this, that ventriloquism really was the first special effect. I promised him I'd disseminate that little information because he got so caught up in the story he was telling, he forgot to say that he wanted to say that. So thank you so much, Phil, for coming on the show. And that truly is it for us this week. A reminder, you can find all you need to know about Ventriloquism Weekly by visiting our website, ventriloquismweekly.com. Reach out to me, and it is to me directly, by emailing ventriloquismweekly@gmail.com. You can find our group on Facebook by searching Ventriloquism Weekly -podcast for ventriloquists, or you can tweet us at Talk4Two, a little @ symbol at Talk4Two, or you can use the little number sign. It used to be a number sign or a pound sign. Now we call it a hashtag Talk4Two. I don't know. There are some of you out there who maybe don't know how social media works. I'm one of them. TALKFORTWO if you want to tweet or hashtag about the show. From New York, signing off for Ventriloquism Weekly, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding all you vents out there to keep talking for two.